Good morning, Tigers. So, yesterday I had you watch a video on the Civil War to kind of just get through that. I know it's a really quick thing. We didn't really get into many of the battles, but I wanted you to at least get that information down. So, now what we're going to look at is, what happens after the war ends? How do they rebuild the South and get everybody to come back together? So, we're going to read these few pages. So the main idea for the plans for Reconstruction is President Lincoln and Congress, they disagreed about how to rebuild the South. So as the Civil War ended, Americans faced a great challenge. When the South tried to leave the Union, the nation had nearly split apart. During Reconstruction, the country had to be reunited. The period when the South rejoined the Union is called Reconstruction. Reconstruction was a difficult time. Americans could not agree on how to bring the South back into the Union. Some wanted to make it easy for Southern states to rejoin. They hoped the nation could be almost the way it had been before the war. Many Northerners felt differently. They were bitter about the war and blamed the South for it. Some of them wanted to use Reconstruction to punish the South. President Lincoln did not want to punish the South. He asked Northerners to forget their anger. Lincoln said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." Lincoln planned to let the defeated states set up new state governments and rejoin the Union quickly. Many people disagreed with Lincoln, especially the radical Republicans. These senators and representatives wanted to greatly change the South. For example, they hoped to use Reconstruction to protect the rights of African Americans. Because they disagreed with the president, Republicans in Congress wanted to control Reconstruction. So then we're going to look at what happened to Abraham Lincoln. So before Lincoln and Congress could agree on a plan, disaster struck. On the evening of April 14th, 1865, Lincoln went to a play at Ford's Theater in Washington. John Wilkes Booth, an actor, crept up behind Lincoln. Booth supported the Confederacy, remember the Confederacy is the South, and was angry about the South's defeat. He pulled out a gun and shot the president. Abraham Lincoln died the next day. Lincoln's assassination shocked the nation. Assassination is the murder of an important leader. Lincoln had become a hero to many people. His death filled them with sadness. They would miss his leadership during the difficult years of Reconstruction. And here's a great photo where large crowds would gather for parades honoring President Lincoln after his death. Oops. So after Lincoln's death, the vice president, Andrew Johnson of Tennessee, became president. Now, Johnson put Lincoln's plans for Reconstruction into action in 1865. The Southern states quickly set up new state governments. The federal government forced them to abolish slavery in the state constitutions. At the same time, though, most Southern states passed harsh laws called Black Codes. The Black Codes limited the rights of former slaves to travel, vote, and work in certain jobs. Radical Republicans in Congress were unhappy about the Black Codes. President Johnson upset them more by allowing Southern states to elect former Confederate leaders to Congress. Congress fought back. Members voted not to let the new Southern representatives join Congress. They passed a law to protect the rights of freedom, who were the people freed from slavery. Congress also created the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau provided food, clothing, medical care, and legal advice to poor blacks and whites. It set up hospitals for schools and found jobs for many. So down here is a great mural that shows kind of the Reconstruction. So number one, if you start over here on the side, these are where students are attending a new school that was opened by the Freedmen's Bureau. Back over here shows radical Republicans impeaching President Johnson. Then if you move to number 3, which is right here, African Americans will vote for the first time. And then finally, number 4, African Americans will serve in Congress. So in 1867, Congress began its own Reconstruction plan. It put the South under military rule. Soldiers from the National Army marched into the region. When they arrived, they forced Southern states to obey Congress. The states had to allow all men, including blacks, to vote. After taking over Reconstruction, Congress tried to remove President Johnson. In 1868, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Johnson. To impeach means to charge a government official with a crime. They accused him of breaking one of their new laws. Congress almost forced Johnson out of office, but they did not succeed, and he finished the presidency. So, carpetbaggers and scalawags. Some Southerners supported the Republicans during Reconstruction. Those Southerners were very unpopular in the South. Southerners who helped the government during Reconstruction were known as scalawags. Scalawag was a slang word for an old, worthless horse. Many Northerners traveled south during Reconstruction. Some wanted to help rebuild the South, but others just wanted to make money. These people were known as carpetbaggers because they often carried suitcases made of carpet material. Southerners disliked carpetbaggers and did not want them there. So, the Constitution will change as a result of all this. So during Reconstruction, Congress created 3 new amendments to the Constitution. The new amendments gave the national government more power over the states. They also protected the rights of African Americans. The first of the new amendments, the 13th Amendment, ended slavery throughout the United States. In 1865, the states ratified the amendment, which means they approved it. Black codes still limited the rights of African Americans. To protect those rights, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, which gave citizenship to African Americans. It said that a citizen's life, liberty, or property cannot be taken away without a fair trial. This is called due process of law. It also said that all citizens must be treated equally under the law. Almost every Southern state refused to ratify the 14th Amendment. They did not want the national government to interfere with their state laws. Congress declared that Southern states had to ratify the 14th Amendment to rejoin the Union. The states then agreed to the demands of Congress. In 1870, Congress passed the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing African American men the right to vote. The 15th Amendment had an effect right away. African Americans began taking part in government. Religious leaders, former soldiers, and others ran for office. Some became leaders in community and state government. Many African Americans served in state legislatures. They worked to create the first public schools for whites and blacks in the South. 16 African Americans joined the United States Congress. Blanche K. Bruce and Hiram Revels of Mississippi became 2 of the first black senators. The amendments passed during Reconstruction helped all Americans. They protected people's rights and made laws fairer. For example, the 14th Amendment requires both the federal and the state governments to treat all citizens equally and fairly. The amendments, however, did not solve all of the nation's problems. Some people, both in the North and in the South, did not want African Americans to vote or to have equal rights. Sometimes laws protecting rights were ignored. The struggle for equality would continue for African Americans. So in this lesson, we remember that Congress and President Lincoln, they had different ideas, different plans for Reconstruction. President Lincoln was assassinated just after the war had ended. Congress took control of Reconstruction from President Johnson, and there were 3 important amendments being ratified during the Reconstruction. So why does this matter? Well, during Reconstruction, the nation's laws became fairer with new constitutional protection for citizens' rights and freedoms.